Thank you so much.
Спасибо вам. So let's look first at the first question that has to do with the equation of exchange. So I'm going to go to the whiteboard to discuss it. So as you remember, the amount of money that we have in currency times the rate of spending is taking is equal in nominal terms to GDP. Compares the price level includes its output in the story. And the question is, how did the base of change in these variables relate to one another? So, for example, in the question, you have to assume that output is falling 3%. So let's see, to determine the rate of change in each variable, let's do a couple of mathematical operations. First, take natural logs on both sides. And then second, note that we can fully differentiate across the equation because all four variables change from time to time. So there's the differential for money and the differential for velocity. And the same thing on the right-hand side. By D and media, the change over time in that variable. Okay, now we know from calculus that the derivative of the natural log of a variable, call it x, with respect to x is equal to 1 over x. Now suppose that we multiply through both sides of the equation, the dx, the differential in x. So we have the differential of the natural log of x equal to dx divided by x. In other words, the left-hand side equals the rate of change in x. So, for example, if x changes by 2 units over time, then the original value of x is 10. Then the rate of change in x is 2 over 10 or 20%. And that is the background that you need, I think, for this particular question. We have from this relationship right here that the rate of change in money plus the rate of change in velocity is equal to the rate of change in prices of quantity. This would be an equality sign. So I'm going to denote the rate of change as percentage times D. For example, here is the rate of change in X. It's just notation. Okay, so far. Now you can take it from here because in the question, I give you the rates of change for 3 of the variables and ask you to consider the 4th variable. So here's the rate of change for M mini supply, the rate of change for the price level P, and the rate of change for output. And then I think you can take it from there. Any questions about that problem? Okay. So let's move on then to question number 2. I've got a problem in that final. Let me try to call it up again. Can you see that final? Can you see it?
Yes, I can see it.
Okay, good. So here's a question really about aggregate demand in the aggregate supply and demand analysis. We have that the central bank has lowered the interest rate for any given price level. And we are asked to consider how this might affect aggregate demand. Okay, so there are a couple of ways that you can approach this problem. One is to use the equation of exchange that we just discussed, and then solve for output by dividing through both sides of the equation by price. So output rises with money supply and the rate of spending, and then falls in the price level. We have that the interest rate has fallen because it's done because of monetary policy. because of what the national bank is doing. In particular, increasing money supply will reduce the interest rate. One way to think of this is to consider that the interest rate is the price of holding a tenge. Not the price of spending it, but the price of holding it. So when the interest rate falls, it may promote a rise in money supply. And by increasing, when money supply increases, shoe will increase as well. There's a direct relationship here between money and output. If they hold constant velocity and the price level. So that is one approach to the problem. Another approach is to use the Keynesian analysis that output is equal in real terms to consumption, investment. This depends on the interest rate, government spending on goods and services, and then the net exports. So when the interest rate falls, investment will rise. And output, aggregate demand will increase as well. So in other case, we have an aggregate model that looks like this. On the horizontal axis, we have Q, which is output. And on the vertical axis, either the price level or the rate of inflation. So I will use the price level here. Here is aggregate demand. As the price level falls, the amount of money that we are holding becomes more valuable in spending. So the additional spending will increase the amount that firms want to produce. Since now they can sell their extra production. And in either case, we have a rise in aggregate demand. Looks like that. And then finally, here is aggregate supply in the short run. The short run, I mean that input prices are fixed, the wage in particular. So as the price level rises, firms can sell more of their output for more taking, and they will profit because they do not have to raise the wage. The wage is fixed in the short run, perhaps by contract. So in other analysis, either using this equation or this equation right here, the fall in the interest rate will increase aggregate demand. And I think that is the background that you need for question number 2. Just remember that in the long run, the aggregate supply of function is vertical in the graph. So here's the long run analysis. Again, we have output on the horizontal axis and the price level on the vertical axis. Aggregate demand, as before, is still downward sloping. But it is always the case that when prices fall, people to buy more than before, given our money supply. But now, aggregate supply in the long run no longer has a positive slope. Instead, it is a vertical line, the same amount of output to any price level. The reason is that in the long run, the amount that we produce depends not on prices, because prices are very flexible, but instead depends on our resources and our technology. How many workers do we have? How many machines? And what do we know about production? That is, aggregate supply depends in the long run on real factors, physical factors. the technology is just the information that we have for production. In the long run, prices like wages will adjust in such a way that all workers who want jobs will be able to find them. At given the wage. In the long run, all labor and capital is employed. Everybody's working. So to note that level of output, when we have full employment, is too low. And there is too low in the analysis. So, for example, suppose that we have a fall in aggregate demand. So there is the new aggregate demand function. In the long run, the shift in aggregate demand affects prices, but not output. We are still producing at the full level of employment, but at the lower price level than before. Because the fall in demand has, in the short run, led to layoffs. And then in the long run, workers will offer to work at lower wages rather than being unemployed. The lower wages are pulling down the price level. They lose their jobs in the short run because we have assumed that wages are fixed in the short run. I think everything else you can in the problem you can figure it out from this background. Any questions about that problem?
It's clear.
Okay. question 3 is best answered, I think, with the ISLM model. So you be told that money demand refers to the amount of money in paying that they are willing to hold, not to spend, but to hold at present. So the amount of money that you have in your purse or in your wallet may be a good money demand. The thing about banknotes is that they enable us to withdraw money at any time. So we must withdraw leave our money in the checking account until just before we need to spend it. In other words, the Bank of Net has decreased the demand to hold money rather than to leave it in the checking account. The Bank of Net cut the demand for cash. And this example, suppose that you spend $1,000 per day. So you have a demand of cash for $1,000. And also suppose that you go to the bank only once per month. Then you will at that time withdraw $30,000. So in this case, your average demand for cash will be fairly high because during the month, in the first 2 weeks, you are turning around a lot of money. So the story looks like this. Here is your demand over 1 month. So you spend 1,000 TD per day until at the end of the month you have no cash remaining. On day 30. And otherwise, during the month, you are pulling down the money in your wallet or purse by spending 1,000 tenge per day. Here is 30,000 tenge. So your average money demand over the month is 15,000 tenge. It is high because at the beginning of the month you withdrew a lot of money to spend it slowly. So when you go to the bank only once per month, you have a high demand to hold money. That's the basic point. Now, suppose instead that your bank installs a bankomat that is easy for you to use. Now, because the bankomat is so convenient, you will withdraw not 30,000 tenge at the beginning of the month, but instead 1,000 tenge every day. In other words, leave the money in the bank account, but it can earn interest. Now, with the bankomat, the average demand for money is 1,000 tenge. So, in fact, maybe lower than 1,000. Oh, but we will assume that you go to the bank once per day for 1,000 tenge. And then by the end of the day, you just spent up 1,000 tenge and then go back to the bankomat. In short, the bankomat reduces to demand for money. Okay, so far on the vocal map. Oh. So let's take a look at how this fall in money demand may affect the national economy in terms of the ISLM analysis. So you remember that in a closed economy, output will increase as the interest rate falls because people borrow more money for spending. There is the IS schedule. And here is the LF schedule that reflects money supply and money demand in equilibrium. You remember that money demand depends positively on income and negatively on the interest rate. Money supply is given, although the LM function is a constant. And therefore, for the money market to be in equilibrium, money demand must be a constant as well. That means that when income rises, the interest rate also must rise, or we will have a change in money demand. So, for example, suppose we begin at point A on the other schedule. The money demand equals money supply. And we consider a movement on LM up to point B. All along the LM schedule, money supply is constant. Let us say that money supply is 3 trillion taking. So money demand has got to equal 3 trillion taking as well. But as we move from A to B, output is rising, which means that money demand is increasing as well. So to bring money demand back down to the original level, the interest rate has got to increase. So from A to C, money demand rises because people want to hold more money when they are rich, so they may be spending that money not today but tomorrow. Now, money demand at point C is higher than at point A. Thus, at point C, we have excess money demand. The interest rate must rise in order to bring money demand back to this original level. That is, we move now to point B, where the interest rate is higher and consequently money demand is lower than it was at point C. Okay, so far. So in short, money demand equals money supply. Supply the constant all along the Ellen curve. Okay, now suppose that something happens to reduce money demand. Something outside of the model that we're talking about, technology. Then along the initial Ellen curve, we now have excess money supply. We don't demand so much money as before. So output must rise to soak up the excess money. This means that the Ellen schedule is shifting to the right. So every interest rate, we have higher income than before. So that means that output has risen and interest rates have fallen. As we move from the original equilibrium at point F to the new equilibrium at point G. I think that is the information that you need to answer that particular problem. This analysis so far has been for a closed economy. But money is not crossing the borders or taking remain in Pakistan. And therefore, the central bank can manipulate the money supply as well as the interest rate. Now, suppose instead that they had an open economy. Looks like this. And the open economy, the National Bank must take as fixed the interest rate because the interest rate is being set not in Pakistan but around the world. So the interest rate is no longer a variable, it's a parameter, it doesn't change. But the exchange rate can change. The exchange rate of penny per dollar. So now, in the open economy, the IS function is not a downward sloping, it is upward sloping. The reason is that higher exchange rates reduce the dollar cost of the penny for people with dollars or buying more than before from Kazakhstan. And then the other change in the open economy is that the Lm function is the same amount for any exchange rate, just the policy of the National Bank. Okay, now they have that money demand has fallen, and therefore we have excess money in the story. That is, the original Lm schedule is no longer in equilibrium. The so-called the excess money supply output must rise. Because people demand more money to home when they are rich rather than when they are poor. The urban schedule will shift to the right. Like that. Now we have depreciation of the tenge and therefore an increase in exports and output. All right, so far. So I believe that this is the background that you need to answer that question. Question 3. In question 5, the basic point is that the Basel rules tend to make both recoveries and recessions more severe. They increase the volatility of the business cycle. So under Basel rules, risky loans or assets in general must be backed by more bank capital than safer assets. Remember that bank capital is the amount of money that the bank raises for selling shares of its own stock. The problem is this: suppose that we have a recession. then bankruptcy becomes more likely, more common. And those businesses that are going bankrupt will not be able to pay off the money that they have borrowed from the commercial bank. So this means that under the basic rules, the commercial bank has got to provide more money, more bank capital per dollar of risky loans. When I say that it is backing the risky assets, I mean that it is holding more money in reserve. So as a result, lending in Kazakhstan is falling because of the Basel rules. Which slows down economic growth. So the economy remains in recession for longer because of the Basel rules. And workplace in a recovery assets become safer because there is not much chance of bankruptcy. And therefore, the commercial bank has excess reserves that it will try to lend out in order to earn interest. But this means that spending will rise throughout the nation increasing the chances of inflation. So in short, the proposal rules are making more volatile the business cycle. Recessions get worse and recoveries are overheated. So this is the background on that question. Okay, so far. In this question, the point is that the monetary base is not pure money. When we talk about money supply, we usually mean cash and checks or typical deposits. The monetary base, however, is a bit different. The monetary base refers to forms of money that the central bank can control directly. It can control cash, for example, by printing more money. But otherwise, the central bank is manipulating reserves that is money that has been set aside and is not available to spending. Reserves are not money. That is the penalty start. So the monetary base is not pure money. Cash is money, but reserves are not. The last question concerns the money multiplier. The multiplier is the amount of money that the central bank can create by adding one more penny to the military base. Mainly, this particular question is mathematical. Just use calculus to determine the impact of the test ratio DC. And the impact of the deposit to bank reserves ratio. So it is just a matter of taking derivatives. But economically, I hope that you can see that a higher deposit to cash ratio will increase the amount of money that can be created. There is a lot of money in the process that can be lent out. So you should find that an increase in the deposit to cash ratio will increase the multiplier. However, you will actually have to use calculus to show that. And the same thing for the other ratio of deposit to bank reserves, because bank reserves cannot be spent. However, to do this and to for the problem, we will have to show mathematically that the negatives are positive.